in order to come out good. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and live. I'll tell you right now. All right, good. You're live.
Yeah, I still got some kind of white screen.
We could see you. Could you hear me?
Are we live?
Yes, you're good.
Are we ready for the introduction? All right, welcome to Roll Call, episode number 9, the number one Birmingham roller podcast, bringing together Birmingham roller fanciers from all over the world. Today, we have our co-host, Benjamin Solario, and our guest today is none other than Ken Billings. Ken is a Master Flyer, a 2019 Lifetime Achiever. Good morning, Ken.
Good morning.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast. We're looking forward to picking your brain a little bit.
Yeah, it should be interesting. Ain't a lot to pick at.
Well, Kenny, I've been knowing you. I've been knowing you for quite a number of years. I remember going out to see your birds. Fantastic spinners. Spinners, real rollers at your place. So I am really excited to have you here. I have a lot of respect for you. I have a lot of respect for what you do for the hobby. And tell us about yourself.
Not a whole lot to tell. I think I'm more of just a kind of a working class guy. Did just like everybody else. Got started when I was a kid, catching them out of barns and all that stuff. So yeah, just blue collar. Drive trucks for a living. I think it's kind of a detriment to the roller progress, just because I'm home every third day, that type of stuff. So, make some unique situations for getting ready for competition,
Yeah, no doubt about it. I often tell the supervisors at work, your work is starting to get in the way of flying rollers. So, I guess you could say that when you get my age, So,
yeah.
Look, are there specific things you'd like to talk about today?
Well, I watch all the podcasts and everything's and so you look for the things that are a little different.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have the generalization stuff, down. So I guess the things that I'd kind of like to hit on, and I think we'll hit on them anyway, is just, some different stuff instead of just the basic, I feed them this and that and I put them together and I breed them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. There's just a lot of things in the hobby. I really didn't sit down and list anything out. We've been talking a little bit. I guess a good place to start, I think, would be maybe in the breeding part of it. I know something that I do a little bit different than most is when I was a young man, my dad was a fighter. He had the chickens. And so I spent a lot of nights climbing orange trees and catching stags out of trees and going through keeps with my dad and reading books. And, because he was trying to get me to follow in his shoes like, every dad does, I guess. I know I did it to my kid. It lasted till he was about 6.
Right.
But I read this book about a guy, Kelso, and through that and through my dad's teaching about breeding his gamecocks, I kind of got this system in my head early on. And it was, I've gleaned some of my own terms now, like seed stock, is one, and it's based on that. And what I basically did was start out looking for pigeons that I could inbreed. I was big on this thing through my dad, basically, that good stock had to be stock that was good enough to be inbred. The gene pool had to be strong enough that it could withstand being a family without always having to bring something in. And I went to a lot of birds. Now, one of the main pigeons I hit on that man, I swear, the deeper I inbred to that hen, I termed another little term that I call direct line inbreeding. And that was where I started breeding. You know, a lot of people talk about 3/4 in a cock or 3/4 in a hen. But I started, I found this little hen, 285, that I got from Doug Olette. And I flew her. I brought home a lot of birds from Doug, but so I was never supposed to fly her, but I did. And she was a good roller, but she wasn't a great roller. And, you know, back then I was trying a bunch of pigeons. I had like 125 birds off of the same families that I went through. But this hen, I 3/4'd her because she bred really well. And so I put her on her full brother to start with. Then I took the son off of that, put it back to the mom, and a daughter off of that were good in the air, put her back to the dad. And I did that for 10 generations, just kept taking the best son off of the hen and go back. And then when I got a good son off of that, go back. And I swear by the 10th generation, and the pigeons were getting actually to the point they were starting to get bigger and healthier. And to the point I thought it was getting I needed to make sure and pick one that was a little smaller in size, if you know what I mean. They just got stronger. But so with 5 birds, I did and I still to this day, I have those birds. I did I don't remember what year, but from the same family of birds, Keyser come down to visit with his wife, and he brought this old cock, 1290, and he's like a 1980 cock. And I didn't even use him the first year, and he's already like 10 or 11. And the next year, I put him on one of my hens just to see, and you know, he's basically out of the same family, same backgrounds, and produced pretty good. And so the next year, I give him a good hen, and they really hit. It was really good. But then by the next year, he didn't fertile no more eggs. He was done, you know. So, but that's the pigeon I've brought in since '86. And so that seed stock, I bred it, flew it, competed with it, you know, done pretty well, did all this year. But I always take those pure birds and I will cross them over on something to make what I call battle crosses. And they've worked really well, you know, with every family. Once you get them inbred like that, I always look for another family that was, you know, somebody kept a family and was working with. And so still today, I have my seed stock pure. I have a cross that I'm working with, but I found a cross that's good enough now that's kind of got me thinking about making a subfamily from the cross, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know if I'm really conveying this right, but what I'm trying to point out is that with me, there's a seed stock, there's a side of my pure family that I keep pure, and I plan on keeping it pure forever. It doesn't degenerate out or nothing, but anytime you cross it, it opens up. So my kits will always have my pure stock in it, and they'll have a few battle crosses that I'm trying or whatever. And it's kept me competitive all these years. You know, I'm not the best at it. I'm not the, you know, I'm just not the best. I'm just like everybody else, but it's kept me in the mix. You know, it keeps you competitive.
Right.
And I always tell people, you know, the reason I never enter stuff into my seed stock is because once you outcross, and now we're just talking families of rollers, you know, but once you bring something into your family that you actually start introducing into your seed stock, you can never take that out. It's like putting a turd in a punch bowl. You know, you put the turd in and you can take the turd out, but the punch still ain't worth drinking.
Right. Got it.
So kind of the same thing. That's my thinking is, you know, I keep my seed stock pure because if into it, I've changed it. And man, that's what, you know, those pigeons have been successful for me. They have the speed, they have the depth I want, they have the type I want, they have the character I want. The one thing I don't have is when I cross that I'm always looking for is more frequency. You know, they seem to they break pretty well together, you know, probably not the best, you know, but, you know, they break. And so that's the only thing, you know, trying to bring them from that 20 to 25 breaks up to that, you know, 30 to 45 breaks is what I'm always looking for in the battle crosses. And, you know, hopefully I'm getting ready to retire here in a year and a half, and then I can actually fly pigeons, you know, try and put some of the stuff into to the works.
So Ken, have you come close to finding that cross that works?
I think
the way you're looking for.
I think I do. That's what I say. I found this cross. It really, I didn't, actually Austin Benjamin, who's a really good friend of mine, got some, then he crossed the first one. They came over and got a little inbred hen from me, and I was going to cull it. I just was going to cull it. And I was over at his house one day, and he's watching birds, and he tells me this bird, man, is just smoking, and he says, oh, it's off of that hen. Well, he had crossed it. So he did a couple pair. And so he called me up the next year and said, hey, how about trading 10 squeakers for 10 squeakers? And of course I was just, I was thinking of testing the same thing. So I thought it was a good idea. And he took his 10 home and I took my 10 home, and I didn't even fly mine. I just stuck them and let them get older. Next year I bred 40 birds, and of the 40 birds, man, I had a cranking little kid, about 20 good. And I lost him. I bought this house, and that's kind of set me back. So I don't even have loss right now to breed in. I got all my birds kind of sitting on hold, and I'm working on some other stuff. But anyway, yes, the answer's yeah, I think I found. So I tried them all. I've got a little sliver of my birds crossed on Monty's. I got a little sliver of my birds crossed on J Star. I mean, I've tried all the top birds, bringing them in, but I always keep separate breeding lofts, breed my real stuff, my seed stock I breed individually. The others I don't worry about because they're for flying purposes, And if something comes, I just start from there because it's starting over,
So
right.
Kenny, how far back do you go with your seed stock? I mean, I think I saw your birds. It probably was maybe in the 90s when I came out to your place.
I got the originals between 84 and 86.
Wow.
Was when the seed stock, I got the hen from, so I got a hen from Doug. I got my main cock, I call him the cringy cock, but I got him from the dog trainer. He was sold in a lot of pigeons that Keyser and Borges took to the Monday auction sale. That won't mean much to you guys, but Monday auction like a swap meet, but they sell all kinds of farm animals and stuff. And I went down and I seen this band, and this was early on, but I seen Krenza's band on one of those pigeons. But at that time I was pretty broke raising kids and, struggling, and it was in a cage of like 40 birds. And so the birds went for $1.25 a piece or something, but still that was like $60 a cage. Right. So I hit the guy up and said, hey man, I'd like to there was a JCB banded bird in there. And, so I hit the guy up and he says, no, I said, not really interested in that. I really come here to get some parlors today, but we're training, I use these to train with. And so I told him, well, hey man, I got parlors. So I traded him a pair of parlors for that cock. And that cock turned out to be a good one. So that, and then I got a bird from Dave Sanchez. He was one of the main cocks that I used. So, just there's 5 birds in that original family that are my seed stock. Well, there's 6 now. I just told you about 1290.
Right.
So,
well,
were straight seed stock there was one Monty cross hen in there, crossed on mine. No, that would have been the following year. So no, the ones you've seen were just straight seed stock. Because I remember when you come to the house, we flew.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I was asking because I know that you preach inbreeding, and a lot of guys are against it. I don't know why.
I know why.
Why is that?
Well, the reason is 2 things. The old timers, most of them, they kind of taught that inbreeding is the cause of things. I remember reading an article by, I think, Elmer Smith, man. It had to be back in the 1940s. And he's talking about inbreeding causes feather rot and canker and, all kinds of crazy stuff. And my theory is just the opposite. Inbreeding uncovers things. That's why I was telling you I went through so many birds, because inbreeding usually most birds by the 2nd or 3rd generation, start to uncover all of the faults that have been just put in by crossing up. And, every bird has like 17,360 different genes in each individual bird. So when you're just crossing all the time, you're kind of keeping that stuff buried, pops up. But when you start inbreeding, you start doubling those genes up. Mm-hmm. So our only real tool in breeding, until we get to the scientific part where we actually can follow the genes, is to breed them, observe them, fly them, and select them, right? That's our only real tool. Right. So I don't see how, outside of inbreeding, you ever select those genes if you're always bringing stuff in, because you're always covering it up. So anyway, I just look at it like inbreeding takes all the stuff that's been swept underneath the dirty rug, and uncovers it. So most birds by the third generation will degenerate, but the ones that don't are the ones you want to use. And that's why I was telling you, I went through a lot of birds, even of the same family, that just don't work. But then some birds, you find you inbreed them and they stay as good and get better and better, or, at least retain all the qualities. Mm-hmm. And those are the pigeons that you run with, or I ran with, to make my seed stock. So they're still in. I mean, you look at a pedigree, man, dude, if it was humans, we'd all be in jail. It's gnarly,
It's tight, huh?
It's tight. And they're still tight. They're getting so tight that I try to kind of go out a little bit, but it's impossible to go out very far. At this point. But those pigeons are the pigeons that really blow open some nice stuff, man, when you do a good outcross.
I bet. I often think about, what I see when I go out and about watching other people's pigeons. And to some extent, I come to the conclusion that a lot of the newer fanciers don't seem to know what a proper roller is, even when they see it in the air, because, you have all these different wing positions that are scoreable in competition. And I think that can confuse a young flyer, if they don't know what a proper roller is supposed to do and how it's supposed to look. Can you share with us what a proper roller should do and look like?
Yeah, to me, a proper roller should ball up, and the more wing you see, the less it's worth. I mean, that's, if a really good spinner, what the ones we're looking for, you don't see wing style, but more pigeons than not, you do. We want high wing style, the tighter in and the more it comes in, the more we want. But I really think that's a disservice even to the new guy. I think the two things that new kids starting need to really focus on is birds that really spin and look clean and don't wing switch. I'm amazed, Ray, at the amount of people who still don't know what wing switching is. I mean, I've talked to old timers, they'll watch a 40, 50 foot bird roll and switch 4 or 5 times and they're excited,
Right.
And I mean, and that always amazes me, because that's one of the things that just, stand out like sore thumb, or floating, or, any of that stuff. There's guys that still think when a bird parachutes out of a roll, they should still be scored.
Yeah.
I mean, all that stuff. I think that's a failure on our part, just as a hobby. One of the things where I think a lot of it started, man, when we first started the World Cup thing, it was, I mean, if you got a 1.4, you had a smoking kid.
Right.
And the rules were set up so that Birmingham rollers could compete with rollers. Mm-hmm. That's how they were set up. But now we use them where we start at 1.5 in the middle, and then we give a great kit 1.7, only 0.2 of a difference.
Right.
We can't make up the difference. So the minimalist thing is killing me. I'll tell you what, it honestly pisses me off. It really does.
Tell us about that.
Well, so much right now, there's a trend toward, you don't want anything that rolls over 20 feet. And if 10 to 15 foot, man, they can break a lot more, get right back in the kit. That's all you need. And it's the minimal. You want that work rate. You want that. Well, that's exactly what Pinson was saying about tumbler rules destroying competition and destroying the Birmingham. Mm-hmm. The World Cup rules, when Doc, because we live here with Doc and those guys, the guys who set the rules or made up the rules. I shouldn't say set them, but made the rules. They were meant to be, those rollers should be getting 1.0, 1.1s so that the 40-foot spinners get the 1.7s and the 1.8s. Right. But we've got where the rollers get 1.5, 1.6, and the spinners get 1.7, 1.8, and they can't make up the difference. Mm-hmm. I don't know when it happened, somewhere in the 2000s, that all of a sudden everything's, a 1.4 to 1.7, everything. We've even got guys out 2.0s now,
Yeah.
And really, when you give a guy a 1.6, you're saying every bird you scored in his turn was rolling 40 foot and was rolling at a quality factor barely showing any wing. When you give 1.6s and 1.7s, mm-hmm. That's mm-hmm. not, right. It was reality. Right. And so I think that we need to go back to making it so that spinners can compete. Birds who really roll hard can compete, because that was the point of the rules. The point of the rules was to let hard pigeons who expend 10 times the energy in a spin still be able to compete with those birds who minimally roll in depth and minimally roll in speed.
Right.
And we've went away from that. Big. And there's another thing coming from across the pond that is even worse, and that's they want to do away with the quality and depth multiplier. So why would you want to give a kit that rolls 10 to 15 feet the same as a kit that rolls 30 and 40 feet? That would just make it so people would be wanting to score the 10 to 15. And right. Why would you want to give birds who roll good, the same turn that you give birds that roll great? Right. It just makes no sense. You're not, that's the problem. And that's where Pinson was trying to tell us, even though he didn't know the rules that we have, that it can destroy the spinner, the Birmingham roller, if we don't keep focused on the qualities that make them Birmingham rollers. Mm-hmm. If we start putting the minimalist, I call them, if we start making it so we lean towards those birds winning, we're going to quit seeing great rollers and start seeing good kits.
Right. I agree. I agree.
It puts a thorn in my side.
Well, I mean, I think it's for sure one of the things that we have to work on, and I think part of that is the judging, because I think that clarification needs to be given to judges, and there's some training that needs to be done there. There's no doubt about it. I mean, we're all over the place with what quality factor means and what the depth factor is and how it's given and what depth is what. How do you judge depth? I mean, to everybody, depth is going to be maybe a little different.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is. It's the concept, though, Ray. First thing we have to change, to those who set the standard and the concepts that goes through people's minds, that's the direction the hobby goes. Mm-hmm. And so the first thing has to be reiterated and redone that we used to have that we're losing, is that the deeper, the faster, the higher the velocity, the better. Mm-hmm. That's the number one thing. And until, well, not until, but if the competition keeps leaning, which I see it leaning more and more, towards the minimal stuff, we're hurting the hobby. We're hurting our pigeons. We're hurting what we breed for. Mm-hmm. So if we start the concept, first thing we have to do is start the concept, teaching people to breed. I kind of am of the opinion that if the concept was right, when a guy comes and judges and he's doesn't know the rules or he just judges action, you just back. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You need to let what was your name again? I'm sorry. I know Ruben and them, but I haven't met you.
Benjamin.
Benjamin Sorio.
Yeah. I know
Yes.
your dad, from years back, but good to see somebody else following in.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And, it's pretty awesome. So yeah, it's just the concepts. I don't know, the concepts are changing, and I think that concepts change the world, and that's what's happening right now, in my personal opinion. And that's another thing, man. This is all of my opinion, because I know that the hobby's gotten a little thinner skin that used to be back in our day, Ray.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. I don't know. I mean, back in the day, when we got together, you're right. It was about the pigeons. It was about going out to see good kids, great birds. That's what it was all about. And I think, I'll take, for instance, when I went to your place, I wanted to see your birds. I had heard you were flying great birds. I hadn't seen them, and I wanted to see them. So I made that move, I have a lot of respect for the guys that's been around a long time and know what a true Birmingham roller is. And Kenny, you're one of them, and also, you don't hold back from saying what you need to say when you think something isn't right. And I think that's important. It's important that we share that with everybody, so there's a clear understanding. That's why I asked that question, proper role, there's so much we can learn from you, and some of the other guys we've had on the podcast. So
I really, when, for me, I don't put myself there. I think I'm just kind of a student, just like everyone else. I just think that, not just me, but let me gather my thoughts. We cut our teeth in a different era when quality was important.
Right.
And right now there's a trend towards, if it's good enough to score, it's good enough. There's and that's good enough to score, but it ain't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time when you could score with some pigeons, but they walked out of your yard and you go, there's really 3 good pigeons there. The rest of those are all just, fillers. You didn't think about if it's good enough to score, it's good enough. That's good enough. It truly isn't good enough. It's just good enough that you have to put it down as minimal, but it should be good enough to score. Should be 1.0, 1.1, in that area. Maybe 1.2 if it's getting a little better on the edge of good, but good enough should be 1.0. But we're afraid now. That hurts people's feelings. Everybody wants to see the 1.5, whether they've got a 1.5 or not. They just want 1.5 on their scorecard, and you give them a 1.0 and they think you're telling them, they're all crap. No, they're good enough to score. That's what 1.0 means.
Right, exactly.
Scoring it was deep enough, but it wasn't good enough for anything else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Well, I don't think it's something that we can stop talking about, because I think you're totally right. I think you also, I've heard you talk about depth here and there, and what we score as depth. Many of us say, and I feel the same way, that 10 feet to me is not, a bird is not rolling long enough to be able to determine its quality in 10 feet. And I think that I think that even gets worse as you get older,
Yeah.
10 feet is short.
Yes. Yeah.
If it were up to you, if you could change the rules, where would you change the depth factor to?
I would change to a 20-foot minimum. And here's the thing about 10-footers, Ray, and probably the reason I don't get asked to judge much.
Mm-hmm.
If a guy flies a kit that flies at 300 feet and rolls 10 feet and they roll in breaks, I count what I can count. I don't guess. And if the birds that are rolling aren't separating from the flyers, I count what I what is I see roll, and I get to, if it doesn't give me time to evaluate. So 20 foot gives you at least time to evaluate a little. 20 foot, you know, we're talking about 1.2, 1.3 seconds. I mean, I've seen kits where they just bloop, 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 you know, and they're 16, 17, 14, you know, no, there ain't no mind in the world. They're just throwing numbers, you know, and good kits, and this is the truth of it, good kits are easy to score. You can count them when they're rolled out of the kit. You can count them when they're going back. Good kits are easy to score. Minimal kits are where all of the mistakes are. Not all of the mistakes. I mean, there's mistakes. We're all human. But, you know what I mean? The major mistakes, the huge, you know, hundreds of points mistakes come from minimal kits because people just start guessing and throwing numbers. Right. The truly good kits, the ones that are rolling 20 to 40 feet, you know, they're falling out of the kit. The birds that aren't there are there. Even if they fall back, they're still coming back. You have time to judge that. You have time. The human mind has time to see it, time to think about it, time to analyze it, time to count it. Mm-hmm. Those kits are a joy. The ones that, you know, are just, I don't know, I used to call them flash breaks. You know, when a kit's rolling 10 foot and shorter, they're just flash breaks. You know, they're confusion breaks. They're not, even if they're rolling proper at that depth, they're not giving you time to count it. All you can do is guess at it. Mm-hmm. So that's what I do. If you have me over to judge and you're flying a bunch of 10 footers, don't be mad when you get a bunch of 5s and 6s, you know. Right. I'm going to give you what I feel they're doing, but, you know, so that's really how I feel it. So if and here's the thing, I know this will people disagree with this because rules do matter. Okay, rules matter in this. People think that when you have rules and you set things, it doesn't change things, but it does. One time, George came over and I heard him talk about this the other day. But first time I met George, we sat down at the bar and we got pretty hammered one night, and we argued for quite a while over this, you know, kitting rule thing. So my club decided we was going to go with George's thing, and we just made it to where, you know, whatever the biggest kit was, you would judge. You know, we wouldn't if 3 birds were out, the other 17 are good, right? They're breaking. Why? The next thing you know, I mean, within a year, everybody's flying 2, 3, 4, 5 split kits. Because they're putting all these birds in that are deep and fast, but, you know, take off and go the other way, and somebody follows it, and everyone just started flying pigeons you shouldn't fly. Well, it's the same thing with quality. If everybody and this minimum depth, if only 20 foot was scored, if that was the minimum, everybody would start breeding towards that. But right now, 10 foot's the minimum, and everybody's breeding towards a 10, 15. If you set it to where it was 20 foot, people would start breeding for it. The argument against it is, well, that cuts the new guy out. No, it doesn't. It just makes the new guy get better pigeons when he starts. Right. It makes him start at looking at 20 feet and start looking at tumblers, you know, short pigeons.
That's right. I agree. Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
That, Benjamin? I mean, if you started at 20 feet, would you be looking for 20 footers or would you be looking for 10 footers that wouldn't score?
I'd be looking for the 20s.
You know? Yeah, that's kind of how I see it. So I think rules really, really do matter, you know, and I think we're going to get what we want, you know.
Yeah, you know, I just listened to an interview with Robert Parker, and he was talking about a similar thing about depth and about quality and how hard he was on both, because his standards are high. His standards are high for himself. His standards are high when he goes out to judge, you know, another region. And he basically said, you know, if I leave your yard, you know, I mean, you ask me to judge, I may do it, but I'm going to judge it to my standard. And if you don't like it, you know, after I'm done, don't have me back. I'm cool with that. You know, I mean, I don't want to go out and judge anyway. So if you just, you know, if you don't like it, you know, don't have me back. And I think it's the same way if you have judges that are easy, you know. One of the things I want to say about judging, because we've been talking about this, is that I've seen guys walk into a fancier's yard to judge their birds, and the first question they ask is, "What family are you flying?" And you know, I don't feel good about that. I don't think you're not judging that family. You're judging what you see that day in that guy's yard.
Or
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I say, or the person. Yeah, some judges are
the person.
Yeah, they judge people in families of pigeons. You know, if you're in the popular family, you know, you're going to score. Yeah, but those are the ones you don't ask back.
No, I agree 100%. So I just wanted to say that. Ken, for the younger people that come around, I want to ask you a couple questions about how do you choose birds, you know, to bring back into your breeding program?
Okay. Well, so I want to, and this is part of that question, but going back to the 10 to 20 foot thing, when I stock a pigeon for selecting my breeding program, I do not stock pigeons, or I should say rarely. There's been a rare occasion if something is just hang time speed, you know, that's really fast. But rarely, what I stock is what I want in the air. So my minimum is I stock 20 foot minimum down, you know, 20 foot plus, because that's what I want. And here's another thing when breeding them. I totally disagree with this. Put a 40 footer on a 10 footer. What you get is a lot of 40 footers and 10 footers. But so I breed a lot of 30, 40 footers to 30, 40 footers. And I don't find that I have any more trouble with the youngsters in that breeding than I do with the 40 to 10. The only difference is you increase the amount of pigeons that you want in the 40. You know, when you put the 10 in, you increase that amount. And the more you do that, the more that keeps showing up. So, you know, I've heard it said a lot of times, you know, they balance breed. I put my deep pigeon on my short pigeon and, you know, hope for 30 feet. You know, I'm the opposite of that. When I stock a pigeon that rolls the depth I want it to roll. And I mate them up to pigeons that roll the way I want them to roll, in depth, speed, everything. But we're talking depth right now. It was Bruce Cooper, I think. Yeah, I know you know this one, Ray, but I even put out that thing that Bruce Cooper once said, you know, when you mate your pigeons in that letter, mate them too good. And that is true. You know, we should be mating pigeons together that are what we want. And, you know, thinking that, well, if I put two 40 footers together, they're all going to be 100 foot. It's not math. It's, you know, breeding selection.
Right.
So you breed what you want. So going back so in my seed stock, since I am dealing with such a inbred family, I really look for health. You know, I look for the body type and the temperament. You know, most of my birds are dart checks. You know, everybody knows that. And that kind of happened out of youthful pride. You know, honestly, you know, stupid thing in my head. You know, everybody said if you breed dark pigeons together, you got stiff pigeons, you know?
Right.
Well, I'm a believer in character is more important than color. And I was going to prove it. You know, 40 years later, I got a bunch of dark pigeons, you know? Yeah, you can keep dark pigeons rolling, but, you know, to get dark pigeons.
Right.
You know, I found, you know, that's what's important. The most important thing is I have to, you know, since I am breeding a lot of dark pigeons, and, you know, I've got birds that are probably, I don't know, I know at least 10 generations that there will be nothing on the pedigree but a dart check. Some of them a lot more than that, you know, and they still roll, and they roll with decent frequency. But that's the one thing I could use more frequency. So I really have to be careful to stock healthy pigeons, you know, pigeons that don't show any inbreeding depression, because that's the thing that you can't see with inbreeding sometimes. You know, there's the genes that you can't see that you know, it's the same thing with outcrossing. It causes nothing. It doesn't cause it. Shoot, there's a family of mice, and to get off the subject, but there's a family of mice that they've been breeding now for over 75 generations, never went out of brother and sister. And the mice they're what they use in the medical field, they're what they use in everything. So inbreeding doesn't cause it. It's just finding the gene pools that are, good enough to do it. So anyway, that's what I generally look for. I just look for the health and the spin and the frequency and the style and, birds that come in. So another thing I don't like pigeons coming in late. So my dart checks come in between 2 and 6 months and everything usually by 8 months. Anything after 8 months, I'm generally already moved on, because as soon as the following season comes, if I need perch space and you're not rolling, guess what?
You're out of there. Huh? You're out of there. Right.
I believe that, I believe earlier developing, you have a few more bumpers in the learning process because they're young, but I don't believe that early development means that birds will be messed up. I mean, I have a lot of offensive ways of saying things sometimes, but really they're just to make points. And I think but I used to say that everything I ever learned about how to not breed pigeons was from the Howard McCulley writings and Herb Sparks stuff that they sent out, about stalking all these non-performing cocks. And
right.
A bird that comes in the same year it was bred will be dead by Christmas, and those type of things. Just, man, I read those things, I go, man, that I ain't breeding.
Well, hey,
Mr. Kenny.
Go ahead.
So when you're breeding and when you stock a bird, do you just put best of best, or how do you go about that? You don't really care about the eyes, or do you match the eyes, or no? How do you do that?
Well, I put dart checks on dart checks and pearl eyes on pearl eyes. Just because
that's what you got.
That's just what, but no, character is what matters to me. So one thing about breeding a whole bunch of pigeons that look the same, and I think the same thing, when I see the Englishmen, I see all their blue check ball heads, and they're all the same. It's got a thing. There's when you breed all pigeons that look like that, you start looking for the finer details. I can look at a dart check in my line and I can see the ones with softer character. I think Smokey was one of the reasons, the factor of Smokey that followed through was one of the reasons I could breed dart checks for so long. You get the birds that are carrying the horn beaks and horn toenails and stuff. If all black beak and black toenail, they'll get hard on you. They'll roll fast, but they'll get to where they're really seldom really strong. So you got to keep the softer character. And I don't know about all pigeons, but in my birds, a nice pliable, softer feather denotes a little more frequency. When they really start getting hard feathered and slick, they're usually really fast, but they're going to start leaning towards the seldom side. So okay. I think is the easiest thing, Benjamin. I think most people have used color as the softener, when the Richard Jacquenet thing, because it's the easiest thing to see. So, and it's not a bad thing. It definitely isn't. It's a good thing, but it's the easiest thing to see. So I know a lot of guys like to match up orange eye on a pearl eye, or they like to put a grizzle on a dart check, or, whatever, or recessive red. They want to try and balance their colors. I've never been a part of that group. I have no problem at all with it. I understand it. It just hasn't been part of my roller world. Like I said, out of I don't know what it was, just young ignorance. I set out to prove something different. I don't know if I proved it or not. But I do know that character is number one. So the bird has the heart and the engine. Phenotype is the easiest thing in the world to change. I mean, if you want to make them shorter or longer, fatter chested or short, narrow, all that stuff is so easy to change. As long as you got the motor, you got the genes for speed and depth and roll, the type and the color and all that stuff, that's all minimal compared to that. That's what you got to hold on to.
Okay.
you know, and while we're on that subject, something I'd like to touch on is, you know, a lot of guys today, it's different than back when. A lot of guys today, man, are really getting these. I call them bulldog pigs. They look like them bullies. You see the new bullies that they breed? They're like a show bull. They're like a wiener dog with a big head. You know, they got. You know?
That's it.
Yeah. So pigeons I see, and it's to the point. These guys I know take pictures, and they'll feed their pigeons a ton of food before they take the picture to make the chest look even bigger. You know, and I get it. But what I find, the more wedgie a pigeon gets, I'm holding my hands up kind of, you know, this is the front of the pigeon's chest, and they want them, you know, to be like this, all right, like a bodybuilder. But the more wedge you get, the more of the wing out position you get. They just, you need a pigeon. What I really like, I like to see a pigeon when they're right. They have a narrow enough chest that when they come to attention, they're all wing butt. And what gives that is that I think isn't thought about a lot is feather control. I like a pigeon when he sits on the perch and he's just relaxed. His feathers relax. Looks like his wing butts kind of blend into his chest. But when he comes to attention, he draws all those feathers to the body. Wing butts pop out. You know, them little short wing elbows. You know, so that's what I like to see. I like to see a pigeon who has the feather control. When they're that way, I think the feather's right. It's not too hard. It's not too soft. When they're at that point where they come to attention, their wing butts pop out, their feather pulls tight, you know, they're right. When they're too soft feathered, they always look fluffy. They always look full chested. When they're too fat, they always look full chested. And, you know, those birds are going to be from underneath. They're going to look fast from the side. But you get underneath them and you're going to see corn cobs. You know, their wings are going to be the best high X, you know, and that's what we don't want.
Right.
So, you know, that's something that I think, you know, should be looked for in the stock loft. It's not something that you walk around, but, you know, take a look at your stock birds and you'll see the ones who come to attention, pull their feather in, you know, and who relax. And that's when I personally, I don't know that, you know, there'll probably be a lot of people disagree with that, but it's something that I've personally looked for years now. You know, I like the birds that really can control the feather and are a little more narrow. You know, I don't want them built like a weightlifter. Weightlifters look great, but they don't.
Usually don't have stamina, right?
You know, they got to feed all the muscle. You know?
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about young birds versus old bird kits, and a little bit of feeding when it comes down to it. Do you feed a mix, Kenny? Are you
no
straight wheat guy or?
No and no. So yeah, I feed so if you're talking young birds, I don't feed them any different as far as just maintenance. I have hard red wheat, red Milo, peas, and safflower, but safflower is only for the young birds and only to the rolling and, you know, during the winter months. And then in the winter, I add cracked corn to my breeders and to my flyers but I don't fly them usually. If they're on cracked corn, I don't fly them. They just fly too dang long. And cracked corn's not the best. It's just that I'm old and cheap, you know, but I found that my birds, peas, wheat, you know, and the peas have to be Austrian peas. Most things are pretty basic for me. You know, my breeders are just the peas, wheat, and Milo. You know, I just give them equal. You know, feed up all of and add the flour to the breed mix. When I'm flying the pigeons, if they're starting to fly a little low, I increase the wheat. You know, if I'm wanting a little more roll, I increase the Milo. If I want a little more speed, I increase the peas. If they start flying high, I'll give them, you know, 50 to 75% Austrian peas. They'll fly in your face. You know, may take a day or two, and I rotate those feeds. I mean, there's things you do. You know, I always say if it's not broke, don't fix it. Right. You know, and so when it is broke, there's some things you do, but they're just Hail Marys and not worth talking about because you get people doing all kinds of crazy stuff.
Right.
Because I crazy stuff and most of it don't work.
Yeah.
But I have got to where, Ray, just the last little bit, on the last few years, I have a program that when I can get into a program, it works a lot. So the day that I fly every other day, whether it's young birds or old birds. I fly every other day. I got to take that back. If they're really young, I fly every day till they start to roll. But once I'm talking about birds that roll. Birds fly every other day. The day they fly, they get the peas, wheat, and Milo. The day they rest, they get whatever mixture I want of peas and wheat. And I do feed a little bit of barley now and then, if I think they're getting strong, if I need to slow them down. But so what I'm trying to share is I do it every other day. Protein the day they fly, carbs the day they rest. And I restrict the carb. I'll cut the carb down to what I think they need. So the carbs may be, 2 parts wheat or 2 parts Milo and 1 part wheat and a quarter part of that barley. But generally it would be just depending on what I think they need. And I will just feed them a half to 3/4 can. My can that I use, I don't know how people fly without a soup can, but they do. And they're successful at it, but I'm not. So this 10-ounce soup can, I have marks on it before I feed. And so that's the reason I do that. So I'll feed a full can of the protein mix the day that they fly. And then I restrict the carb mix the day they rest, according to what I think they flew the last time. And that's kind of what if I get them into a good rhythm of every time they fly, their protein, their carb, their protein, their carb, their protein, their carb, it tends to work out really well for me. Mm-hmm. The birds tend to get real even on it.
So what about your young birds when once you got them kidded, they're not rolling yet. Do you feed them as much as they want? I mean, are you?
Yeah. So Dave Mosley put me onto something, had to be 12, 13 years ago. I was having trouble with young birds wanting to fly too high. And Dave gave me some of the best advice I think any roller man's ever gave me. He said, you got to do it when they're young, start them when they're young. He said, you feed your young birds all that you can feed them, when you start. So you start with a base. So mine's a food can, like a soup can. Like I said, I can't do anything without the soup can. Mm-hmm. But I took what Dave told me. So I took the soup can, and this was it. I feed them the soup can one day, and the next day you up it a quarter. So you feed them a can and a quarter, mm-hmm. Turn them loose. Everything comes in. The next day I feed them a can and a half. And you keep doing that, keep increasing it until you have birds start sitting out. 1 or 2 doesn't want to react. As soon as they don't react, you cut it back a quarter, and then that's all you can feed your young birds, and them still respond. Mm-hmm. And that keeps them flying low, keeps them flying and it keeps weight in them, keeps them flying at a good height, and it keeps them responsive. And so I think for years I was underfeeding my young birds, even though I was feeding them more than I do my old birds. I still think I was underfeeding them. And since I've started doing that, it works really well. So, pass on what Dave told me to help you don't get pissed off. But
well, that's a great piece of advice. Let's talk a little bit about flying pattern. There's often talk about a figure 8. There's different flying patterns. And I've seen birds fly down the road, come back towards the kid box, braking the whole time, turn around and go back and start all over again. There's different flying patterns, but we often talk about a figure 8. What do you think about that?
I think that we all had to fly figure 8s, and none of us be flying rollers.
That's true.
Just think
that's true.
That every once in a while you get a kit that'll fly them just because they naturally come to it. I don't know why, but most kits fly to the photography wherever how their land is. Mm-hmm. Like living now, totally different than where I lived before that. I lived on a creek before that, and I lived over in California, and flew there. But what is important, at least to me, every time I get a good kit, they pattern, not figure eight, but they pattern. They use both wings, and they don't just fly straight over your head. They pattern. And when the birds pattern, they generally break, you know. Don't pattern, they break on the days they want to break, you know. So it's real important for me anyway. And I think they learn it more at young birds to get them relaxed and get them to pattern. You know, and to me, pattern just means that they fly away from the loft, you know, whatever it is. You know, in California where I live, it was literally a loop. They flew. I had a train yard across the street and this big pine tree, and they would run this loop, and they would break at both ends of the loop. You know, and so they didn't figure eight. Here at this house, it just depends on the wind, which directions come from, but I really think, man, I got the best place I've ever had to fly. You know, the birds they fly better, they fly different, they fly more relaxed, and they pattern better. I mean, George Mason, right where you live. Right.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah. Yeah. He talked about location, you know, and you and I talked about it a little bit, you know, and we talked about, you know, how we look for, you know, if we're planning on buying a house or moving to a new place, we're looking for a location. Definitely different from what our wives are looking for.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you have to learn to play that angle, you know.
Right. Right. We're looking for location. So.
Hey, I moved on the side of that hill out in Melba.
Yeah, man, I remember that.
It just destroyed me. I mean, I never even thought about it because I didn't think about the wind, which direction. It would be great if it came from, but we generally have a northwest wind here, right? So it would come over that hill, and it would just shove your pigeons into the ground, literally. I mean, they wouldn't break 50 feet off the ground, and a lot of times they were 2 or 3 feet, you know. And I moved here, and that was with like a 6-7 mile an hour wind, because what it would do, it'd come over that hill and it'd increase, you know, and it come down on top of them. So here I've got this long slope that comes northwest, comes up the hill, and it just gives them a lift. And yeah, days that would destroy me over there are like perfect here. You know, I'm still learning here. I just moved here. So, you know, I've still got a lot to learn, but so far I haven't got to train a young bird kid here yet. You know, I haven't been able to breed. I don't have my lofts built. I've been working on apartments and pads and stuff like that, getting ready for retirement. But you know,
do you have much of a problem with birds of prey? Kid, well, in your new location, you probably don't know yet, right?
I'm trying to get my birds out, you know, because Don moved up here, man. Things just got tougher.
Yeah, I heard.
But I tried them out the other day. I lost one to the falcon. Here, it's used to. I've never had them this early, and I don't know if it's just because they come earlier here or this. You know, it's different here, but it's still not bad. I mean, we're blessed. So find us, but we're blessed. Coopers are the least of my problems. Falcon are my second. You won't believe what the number one thing at both houses have been so far. Like getting ready for that convention, the red just tearing me up. Wow. And it was a way at the other house, man. My red tails hunt better than falcon. Man, the falcons will get one about every 5-6 times I see him. Red gets one every time he comes, every time he wants.
Wow. That's crazy. That's crazy. I mean, the only place I've ever seen a red tail take a bird is, well, I've seen it at my house, but you know, bird sitting in a tree, he was gone. So, but California, I went to California and saw a red tail take, you know, youngsters, and I was surprised, you know, because of their size, maybe, you know, I guess they learned how to do it.
Hey, so I moved back to California in 2004 for, I don't know, about 4 months. And we started a little club we called the Fat Boys Club. You don't know why, do you?
No.
It was me and Scott and Jack Myers and Joe Borges and Art Lee. And I don't remember anyway. But anyway, Joe was on a fly with us thing, and I was telling about these red tails that were eating my birds, and I was flying out of Billy Matthews' place, and Billy had one of those big steel towers, And Joe was telling me, oh, he said, you got a different kind of hawk. Says them red tails, they can't catch pigeon. They're too slow, you know? And so we're on this little competition fly. And I said, Joe, you watch that tower, that red tail's going to come off that tower. And I said, when he does, he'll get one. And oh yeah. So anyway, man, that thing, he hits the kid and just looked like you blow up a feather pillow, you know, just feathers go everywhere. And old Joe said, I'll be damned. I never would have believed it if I hadn't seen it. Wow. They're bad, man. They use the sun and they work in pairs. Man, you get them, they're bad.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Coopers, I lose the least to Coopers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're in the open pretty much,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Always.
So.
I always look for open ground. If you know, that's the number one key to having a good roller place is open ground. Mm-hmm. You know, got a ton of trees, you're just begging for trouble.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Our houses that are tight end, you know, I mean, Coopers learn how to hunt.
Yeah, over the fence.
Over houses. Yeah, they learn it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Well, Ken, you've won the 11 bird fly twice, right?
Right. Yeah.
You've won the 11 bird championship twice. Tell us how you prep for that 11 bird fly. I mean, I bet it was different for both times you won.
So here's the thing. Every kit's a little bit different. I don't fly for 11 birds. That's kind of the weird thing is, you know, I know I got a friend, Jay, that he's always telling me, you know, there's 11 bird competition and 20 birds and 11 birds. And I tell him, Jay, it's the same pigeons, man. You fly the same dang pigeons. I just take 11 out of the 20. Of course, you're taking the 11 you think are the best, work the best. But I never train for it until I make the finals. And then, you know, if I make the finals in 11 and not the 20, then I'll train the 11 bird team. So for both finals, you know, I trained 11 bird team. But honestly, I get the birds, you know, a little bit, I don't really want to call it weaker, a little finer, just because when you get them a little finer, you get a little more depth, you know, when you're training for finals. But all in all, I do it the same. I really don't do them different. I both times that I won it, the kid in 2014 that I won with, nearly as good as the kid I won with in 2004. The 2004 kid's probably as good a kid as I've ever flown. Mm-hmm. They were, you know, 2014 kid was just, you know, an average kid that had a decent day, you know. So no, I really don't do, you know, I think that all starts just in the breeding. You know, that goes back to what we were talking about before. You know, you're breeding for spinners. I think that they're going to do good in competition. I don't think it matters. You know, another thing is I know a lot of guys say they pick birds from the front of the kid or the middle of the kid, nothing off the back of the kid, and they think they're breeding to build teams. I think for me, it's more I select my best pigeons out of the air, and then when I get a good kid, I train them to be a good team. You know, once you get birds that you know kid, you know roll correct, you know break some. Once you get that, then you just fly them, train them, feed them, train them to be a good team. Where I think a lot of people are nowadays, they'll worry more about the team than they do the spin. And I think we should be the other way around, because I think that they tend to, you know, even like I think about a lot of animals that just naturally, you know, like blackbirds, you know, you've seen they fly and they make those patterns and stuff, or schools of fish. I mean, they naturally have things in them that they do. We just don't give them the opportunity to do them. Mm-hmm. You know, if they're flying and rolling off the side of the kit and turning away and stuff, those pigeons they're not good kit pigeons. You know, they're not team players. But you just select good spinners that kit and break with your team, and then you just train them. I don't think you have to be looking for all your birds that break from the front. You know, I don't do that. You know, but that doesn't mean anything. I mean, obviously, I haven't won much, so you know. But I'm just telling you, for me, it's been that. You know, okay. I don't know. I hope to be able to do better in comps here. We'll see. I know in the World Cup, I finished second once, sixth once, and 12th, I think. And, that was pretty much it. And I have no idea what all I've done in the MBRC. That, neither there. But it's just, for me, it's, I don't know how everyone else is, Ray, but for me, it's just, I fly everything. Man, like right now, three-legged chicken in this next fly. I have no pigeons, I've went 2 years. I have 17 birds in what I call my decent kid. It still needs food. And then I have 14 birds that are basically culls with 4 young ones waiting to come because they haven't bred, and I've lost a few. But I'll fly everything. I'll still fly, and, because you learn as much from losing. And honestly, try prepping just a also ran team and trying to get the most out of it teaches you as much as any prepping a great team. Have you found this? You know what I find really hard is when you get a really good team of rollers, man, it's hard to keep them.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
They commit suicide, or find one in the water upside down, drown something, they just look like they're looking for ways to kill themselves off.
Yeah. I just, birds I'm flying, I just stopped liking them, man. I mean, every time I like them, something happens, So I stopped liking them.
Just got to enjoy it, man. And my advice to all the youngsters is don't wait till you think you're ready to fly in competition. Fly. Don't listen to these old guys that are stuck in the mud and tell you, competition. Man, competition, when the competition came to this country in a big way, it has improved the roller. Dude, I remember going to flies, and you'd be lucky to go to 1 or 2 houses, out of 15 and see good. Man, it's not that way no more. Man, no. We're living glory days of the Birmingham roller in this country right now. Yeah. I mean, the prey are hurting us, but there's a lot of good pigeons out there. So don't wait.
I totally agree. Ken. Who would you say was most influential, in regards to rollers for you?
Oh, there's no doubt. For me, it would be Jack Myers. I think having livestock, I would say my dad, and how I breed and my thought process, I think was kind of pounded in me. But so when I was young, and most people don't know this, but so I've had birds since I was in 2nd grade, right? So when I got to my 8th grade and freshman in high school, I had a hamburger joint job and stuff. And man, I was spending money on pigeons with Elmer Smith and Ace Hogard. And, I was paying $5, for a white bar. And I just, I can still see old Ace holding his fingers up like this and saying, Kenny, that's a choice Birmingham roller right there. And suck air through his teeth, And I mean, I didn't know no better. I believed it, and I loved rollers, and we just didn't have that. And so Jack had moved from LA, and I'd heard about him. I was trying to meet him, but everyone was kind of keeping him a secret. And I ran into a guy at the feed store that worked there, and we started talking about rollers, and he told me about this guy Jack, and I've been trying to meet that guy, and he says, well, we'll go over there Saturday. And we go over there, and I'll never forget it. Old Jack, he lived in this house and had a pool with a diving board. And so I lay down on the diving board, and he turns loose these birds. He called them 26 and Grizzle. He'd moved from LA. And I mean, it was raining pigeons. A couple of them hitting the pool, but they went up and just was raining pigeons. Man, I was just about sucked my heart out of my chest. I was just like, I got to have this. Honestly, so I went home. I put an ad in the paper, and I had 125 pigeons, and I sold every one of them in the paper, for $1 or $2, whatever I could get. Sold them all to Jack's house with my money in my hand and my hat in my hand, and and that's where it started. And he's been a lifelong friend, and just I love the guy. So if there's so many people that have influenced me and what I do. And the guys I met, the Olettes, and even your uncle and them, I met them early on. So, I mean, everybody's had an influence, but if I had to pick someone who I really think changed the roller for me and has been a mentor in life, it would be Jack. You know, we're still lifelong friends.
That's great.
You know,
Benjamin, you have any questions for Ken?
No, sir. He answered everything I was gonna ask, or you asked the question, so it was good.
Great. Ken, I'm going to ask you one last question.
all right.
And basically, it's just, do you have any additional words of advice, for your fellow fanciers, new people coming into the hobby?
Yeah, I think if I had any words of advice, the two big things I'd love to see change. I'd like to see us get back to thinking about quality. When these guys, don't be limited. Don't believe that good pigeons can't compete with minimal pigeons. I mean, Ron Swart once told me speed kills, meaning that, fast rollers, that destroys your ability to get turns. Don't believe that stuff, man. You want it all, you want everything. So, and the other thing is to compete in everything. Don't think you got to be ready, and don't let anyone tell you, that, you're not ready. Just get in everything. I mean, I've missed one fly, and that was when I almost got a divorce. I've missed one fly since I got in rollers, serious, since 1984. I started flying with the Modesto Roller Association that was later the CCRC. I fly every fly, and I lose 50-1. I win one every once in a while because even a blind dog finds a bone. But I have more fun. I've made the best friends of my life. That's the number one thing, is to get out and just do it. Don't sit back on the sidelines thinking you'll do it when you're ready. Just do it. Don't be afraid.
Yeah, those are great words of advice, Kenny. Kenny, I would like to do a part 2 at some point with you, because I think we touched on some things, but I know you have a lot more to say.
Yeah. I mean, we all around talking. There's a lot of stuff floods your head.
Yeah.
The chance. Go ahead.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. I mean, there's so much that could be cleared up, if we talk straight to guys about, things. There's
yes, sir.
Just started in rollers, you hear so many crazy things, and you have to go back and weed that out. And sometimes it takes time, to do that,
Oh yeah.
And I think in these days, the first thing you get is, guys get hit by birds of prey, they back out, they get some bad advice, they back out, I want to say I really appreciate you coming on. I know you work hard during the week, and you enjoy your weekends, and like all of us, we're flying rollers too. So, I really appreciate you coming on. And Benjamin, thanks for co-hosting today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Listen to you more, Benjamin.
Hey guys, I also want to say thank you, Benjamin, Ray, Kenny. You got a lot of guys on here, Rick Shaney, saying thank you for the word of advice and your knowledge that you're sharing. I just want to tell everybody that, I'm going to be more on the sidelines now, trying to run the programs and making it a little bit more interesting to watch. So Ray and Benjamin, we got Daniel Foster is going to be helping out. So I want to say thank you, Kenny. What a great words you shared with us. I appreciate you for being here, and I want to give thanks to the guys that are viewing. Thank you all.
My pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity to trip myself up once more.
Yeah. And then also, what I'm trying to do is get more people involved in this and be a part of it. So those of you that are interested to kind of help us out in any way, just let Ray know, Benjamin, me, whoever, and we could make it work. So Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny. Thanks again, man. Love you, man. Hope to see you once you get the birds going. We're coming to Idaho.